Years ago, we saw a failed attempt by a startup called OnLive. The thought was to deliver a console or a PC-like gaming experience straight to your living room that you'd receive on a little box. And while that service failed spectacularly, it was acquired by Sony in 2015, it did have merit to its concept. Since then, we've started to see tech giants throw their weight around in this arena, whether it's Nvidia with their GeForce Now, to Microsoft's Project xCloud, which has been rolled into Game Pass Ultimate. I did a video last week on how to get Game Pass Ultimate for free every month. If you haven't seen it yet, make sure to click the link in the card up above and it'll tell you how. But the two big tech giants slugging it out right now are Google with Stadia and Amazon with their Luna platform. Since I did recent unboxings on both these platforms, I've got a number of questions, and big shout out to Cornelius too for posting it on one of the videos. Rob, now that you've had a chance to have both, which do you like more? And I'll really tell you that they both have positives and they both have negatives. And we're gonna go ahead and go through those now. I'm Robert, and welcome to Rob Unwraps. And today we're gonna compare Google Stadia to Amazon Luna and see which one comes out on top. First up, we're gonna take a look at Luna and its base offering. Currently, Luna's in beta, and you have to opt in to get started. Once accepted, you can get new games in one of two ways. You can subscribe to their games channel, which gives you access to over 85 games. You'll be able to play them in 1080p at 60 frames per second. You'll also be able to access up to 2 streams at a time per account. This option costs $5.99 a month. If you subscribe to Uplay Plus, which is $15 a month from Ubisoft, you'll have access to around 20 different first-party Ubisoft games, including Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Watch Dogs Legion, and Immortals Phoenix Rising. Basically all their brand new games. To play the Ubisoft games, if you are a Uplay Plus subscriber, you don't have to pay anything extra for Luna. The only additional cost you could have for Luna is if you decide to purchase the controller. Similarly, on Stadia, you can access your Ubisoft games at 1080p and 60 frames per second for free if you subscribe to Uplay Plus. So this works the same on both platforms. You can also subscribe to Stadia Pro for $9.99 a month and get access to a library of about 30 games and play your games in 4K, HDR, and with 5.1 sound. You can also play games that you purchase outright on Stadia, but it doesn't appear that you can on Luna yet. And as seen previous in this video, Stadia has its own optional controller that you can purchase as well. Now that we've learned the different ways that you can get games on each of the platforms, let's go ahead and take a look at one of those games head to head on both.
Forgive me for stepping away. I grow weary of those pissing contests.
One of the best looking games to come out last year for the PC and consoles was Assassin's Creed Valhalla by Ubisoft. Here I've decided to place the Xbox Series X in the far left so you'd have a benchmark to compare Stadia and Luna to. You can see in the screen that the smoke effect appears more vibrant in the X, and the colors are also more pronounced. You can notice that quite prominently there is flicker on the characters' faces in these cutscenes. While this is being played on the Xbox Series X, I did step down the output to 1080, so this isn't coming across in 4K. I didn't want to have any advantages for the console. I wanted to make it comparable to the experience you would have on the Luna or Stadia if you didn't pay additional monies to have the 4K options. In comparison of Stadia to Luna, I always felt that the colors on Luna were not as vibrant as they were on the Xbox, and the same holds true for Stadia, even though it's at a little bit of disadvantage in this shot because it's more overcast and rainy. Surprisingly enough though, I'm experiencing almost no input lag, which is my primary concern when it comes to these types of games, is because you hate to die when you're fighting something and you feel like you were cheated because you hit that command and it just wasn't properly executed. And that brings us to one of the next games I took a look at. This is Infinite Minigolf, and I'm playing this on the Luna platform. One of the biggest deciding factors here is how hard you hit your ball with the putter. And that's controlled, obviously, through the sensitivity on your controller. And at no point did I really feel that I was being hampered by any type of input latency. Years ago, when I tried these different streaming services, it was a horrific experience because you'd either have tons of frame loss, you'd have input lag, and it would just make the games unplayable. And during Assassin's Creed Valhalla, I did not experience that, and so far during this game, I've yet to experience it. I did, however, have quite a bit of fun playing this one, and this big monster truck had something to say about my shot. He apparently didn't like it. From lighthearted and fun to freaky and scary, I went from that Minigolf game to Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. And that lady's face right there alone is about enough to scare the wits out of you. You don't even have to go into the mansion and find her family. As I was playing this game, again, I didn't experience any issues with lag. However, there were certain points where I did notice a couple screen tears on the sides indicating frame loss, but it was never significant enough to impact my gameplay. Next up on the docket was Contra. Nothing like an old shooter to get your reflexes going. And, surprise, surprise, the Konami code actually works, so I was able to start off with 30 men and complete the stage. You will know as I blast through it a few times that I do die. I would like to say that those were not my fault. However, I would be lying to you. A rust has accumulated on my reflexes, and I'm not as good as I used to be as a kid. However, I was able to complete the first stage, and I had a good time doing it. In addition to playing Contra streamed to the PC, I also streamed this one to my phone, and you can see that here as well. You can see on the startup screen for my phone here that not only does the game, while running, perform well, it loads pretty quickly too. But that's not the case for every game, and I'll have more on that towards the end. And the last game we're going to take a look at on Luna on the phone is Iconoclasts. This is also another run, jump, shoot style game, and as you can see, it seems to be performing exceptionally well. Now this is Cyberpunk 2077, and we're finally getting into the Stadia platform. I previously made a video that talked about how Cyberpunk 2077 could possibly be best played on Stadia. I'll provide a link to that in the card above. The performance of Cyberpunk 2077 on Stadia was one of the first games to really start to turn me around on my thought of how well streaming games could be executed in 2021. I still have concerns due to build out of infrastructure across the United States and the rest of the world, but specifically in the US because it's such a large country with a very spread out population and very few centers of real density, which would require the infrastructure necessary to allow this. But as you can see, the game is really running almost flawlessly here. In addition, Stadia also has plugins available to it that I was unable to find if anything similar is available for Luna. This will tell you your current bandwidth, your frames, whether you've had any frame drop, and your total data usage for a session. So if you live in a place or you have an ISP that limits the amount of data that you can use, you can kind of help meter yourself here. And to go from serious to silly, I decided to give Trials Fusion a whirl. Now this is on my phone, and as you can see, it's running pretty well. And while I do attempt to do a 960 flip at some point, and I land it on my head, I'm going to go ahead and say that that was not the game's fault, or the connection's fault, but my own. And to give one final head-to-head shot, we're going to circle back around to Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and this is the game running on my phone on both Luna and Stadia. And you can see on the side that I'm being awarded items, and that is because of the Ubisoft Plus. While technically you can play these games on your phone, the smaller screen does not lend itself to the user interface because it makes it very hard to see almost anything. But you probably could get away with it on a tablet. So there you have it, folks. Stacked up side to side, Stadia and Luna look really good, especially if you have a very good internet connection. However, as your signal quality starts to degrade, so will your performance. So if you live someplace that's more rural and you don't have that great of access to the internet, I really wouldn't depend on this for a way to try and play games. As of right now, it's really great for edge cases and I actually really have a hard time trying to justify why I would ever have any of these services other than trying to explain them to you. It's not something I would pay for. However, it is something that does work. I did earlier mention that one of the games loaded relatively quickly on my phone, and that's great for some of the older ones. Some of the newer Ubisoft games take forever to load. For on Luna, it took 1 minute 43 seconds for Phoenix Immortals to load. It took 2 minutes and 35 seconds for Assassin's Creed to load. It took 3 minutes and 55 seconds for Watch Dogs to load. On Stadia, it took 1 minute and 36 seconds for Phoenix Immortals to load. It took 1 minute 45 seconds Assassin's Creed Valhalla to load. It took 1 minute and 50 seconds for Watch Dogs Legions to load. So hands down, Stadia beats Luna in load times. It also has been around a while longer, so it does have a community and extensions built around it. And these are things that we could potentially see from Luna in the future. However, I do prefer the business model that Luna currently has and their concept around channels. And also with Google, you never know when they're going to decide to shut a project down and you just no longer have access to them. So there's a little bit of concern there. So in the end, if I had to pick only one, I would think that I would lean on Luna, and it simply boils down to the business model, because performance-wise, they were both very close, and they were really spectacular, and only a couple months ago, Stadia wasn't running very well in my area, and it seems to have done a complete 180. This video definitely had the most effort and production value that I've put into one, so I hope that shows, and if you found enjoyment or got some value out of this, make sure you hit the like and subscribe. I really appreciate it. Have a good one.